Lecture regarding the digestive system. First of all, we'll look at the function of the digestive system. Basically, the function of the digestive system is to get nutrients into the body. It takes food like this and turns it into the basic elements of proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids, which are then absorbed into the bloodstream through the digestive system and can go to the different parts of the body through the bloodstream to serve our metabolic needs. So basically, the digestive system is to break down food into nutrients and absorb those nutrients into the bloodstream. There's two groups of organs in the digestive system. First is the alimentary canal, and second is the accessory organs. The alimentary canal is basically a continuous muscular tube that goes from the mouth to the anus. It digests food, it absorbs fragments of food. It consists of the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestines. It's about 30 feet long from the one end to the other. The accessory digestive organs are things like teeth, the tongue, gallbladder, digestive glands like salivary glands, the liver, and the pancreas. All these are accessory digestive organs. I'm sure you probably remember this from Chapter 1 and back in Anatomy 1, but these are the major organs of the digestive system. You have your mouth, oral cavity, the tongue, salivary glands, the pharynx, esophagus, the stomach and the pancreas, the liver, the gallbladder, large intestines, small intestines, rectum, and the anus. The digestive process is broken into 6 essential activities. First of all, there's ingestion, there's mechanical breakdown, propulsion, digestion, absorption, and defecation. All these processes are necessary for the digestive system to fulfill its purpose. How about the propulsion for a little bit? Peristalsis and segmentation. Peristalsis is the way the digestive system moves food particles or nutrients through the alimentary canal. And here represents a tube. This would be the esophagus, for example. You have a bolus of food, and there's constrictors that surround the esophagus, and these constrictors contract. What it results in is pushing the food downward towards the stomach or distally through the GI tract, the alimentary canal. You have constrictors that constrict above the food place that pushes it down, and then sequentially it's constricted so that it propels the food downward eventually towards the anus. And there's the other activity called segmentation. This is when you have non-adjacent segments of the alimentary tract organs alternately contract and relax. And this has a result of moving food forward and backward, And this helps mix food. This is, you can see like this in the stomach when you want to mix food with acid, or in the intestines when you want to mix food with the different different hormones to break down the food, like lipase and amylase and such as that, to try to get a thorough mix of the food and the digestive enzymes. We start at the mouth. The mouth is used for mechanical and chemical digestion. We have a palate. It's made of a hard palate and a soft palate and a uvula. The palate allows us to breathe while we're chewing. Hard palate provides frictional ridges to help manipulate food. The soft palate is muscular and it starts the swallowing process. The uvula helps keep food out of the nasopharynx. The tongue positions food for mechanical digestion. There's salivary glands in the mouth that moisten food and begin the chemical digestion. So digestion of the food actually begins in the mouth with the salivary glands. And the teeth chop and crush food for mechanical digestion. This is the first step in breaking the food up into smaller particles. This diagram shows these structures. You have a soft palate in the back, in addition to the hard palate. You got the tongue. This is the tongue. the uvula hanging down the back of the throat. The tongue is a skeletal muscle, therefore it's a voluntary controlled muscle. It functions to reposition and mix food during chewing, and it forms a bolus. A bolus is what food is after it's been chewed up and when you swallow it. It's no longer called food or bite, it's referred to as a bolus. The tongue initiates swallowing, it initiates speech and taste. The tongue has intrinsic muscles and extrinsic muscles. Intrinsic muscles are muscles within the tongue. These muscles change the shape of the tongue, like cause you to curl the tongue, like in this example here. The extrinsic muscles are muscles that are outside the tongue proper and attach the tongue to the floor of the mouth. And these extrinsic muscles can alter the tongue position, such as sticking your tongue out. This is from extrinsic muscles of the tongue. There's a lingual frenulum, which is a tissue that attaches the tongue to the floor of the mouth. Here's a picture of the lingual frenulum here. This tongue has been raised. There's a little tissue here that tethers the tongue to the floor of the mouth. And it shows the different structures. There's the tongue, there's the palatine tonsils, the uvula, soft palate, hard palate. I mentioned salivary glands. That's when the food begins to be digested in the salivary glands. Salivary glands has chemicals which break down the starches that we eat. Salivary glands cleanses the mouth. They help dissolve food chemicals for taste. They moisten food, compacts food into a bolus, and begins a breakdown of starch with enzymes. So digestion starts in the mouth with the saliva. There are three main salivary glands. These are paired, one on the left, one on the right. There's a parotid gland, which is anterior to the ear. It's external to the masseter muscle. There's a duct that opens up into the oral vestibule next to the second upper molar. That's where the parotid gland drains. When you have the mumps, it involves an inflammation of the parotid glands. You get those swollen cheeks. You have a submandibular gland, medial to the body of the mandible. Its duct opens at the base of the lingual frenulum. And the sublingual gland is anterior to the submandibular gland under the tongue. Here's a picture of this parotid gland here. It's on the side of the face, superior to the masseter muscle. You have the sublingual gland, which literally means below the tongue, and the submandibular gland, which is below the mandible. All these three different salivary glands. This is the opening of the duct from the submandibular gland here, under the tongue. What is saliva? Saliva is 97 to 99.5% water. It's mainly water. It's slightly acidic. It has electrolytes of potassium, sodium, chloride, phosphorus, and bicarbonate. Salivary amylase is a chemical that digests carbohydrates in the mouth. So it begins to digest carbohydrates and starches in the mouth. Lingual lipase digests fat in the stomach. Its lingual lipase is produced in the saliva, but it results in digestion of fat down in the stomach. There's mucus in the saliva, which lubricates food. There's lysozymes, IgA, which is an immunoglobulin, defensins, proteins for help the immune system, and cyanide compound to protect against microorganisms. All this is within saliva. You produce about 1,500 milliliters of saliva a day. That's all. If you can consider 2 milliliters. These intrinsic salivary glands continuously keep the mouth moist. Salivary glands are activated by the parasympathetic nervous system. Remember back when we studied the parasympathetic nervous system? It was the terms were rest and digest. So parasympathetic stimulates the digestive tract. Therefore, it's going to stimulate the salivary glands. So the salivary glands are stimulated by the parasympathetic nervous system. This is strong. If you have sympathetic stimulation, it inhibits salivation and causes dry mouth. That's why when you have to get up to give a speech and you're nervous, your mouth gets dry and you need some water. Your mouth gets dry and you just feel like you have cotton in your mouth. So it's the sympathetic nervous system causing the inhibition of salivation. We have teeth, which is purpose is to tear and grind food. We have deciduous teeth and permanent teeth. There's 20 deciduous teeth and 32 permanent teeth. The teeth fall out. The deciduous teeth, or the baby teeth, fall out at 6 to 12 years of age, and the permanent teeth develop. Teeth are classified as either incisors, canines, premolars, or molars. Incisors, are chisel shaped and they're designed for cutting. Canines are fang-like teeth that tear or pierce. Premolars are bicuspids or broad, round cuspids for grinding and crushing. And the molars are broad and round, have round cusps, and they're best for grinding. Here's the arrangement of the deciduous teeth and the permanent teeth. There's a formula to help remember how many teeth there are. In the primary teeth, there's two incisors on the upper jaw, two canines on the upper jaw, two molars on the upper jaw, and same thing on the lower jaw. Make a total of 20 teeth. But when you have permanent teeth, you have two incisors on the upper and lower jaw. You have two canine, probably one canine on the upper jaw, one canine on the lower jaw, two premolars on each upper jaw and lower jaw, and three molars on the upper and lower jaw, giving a total of 32 teeth. Mastication is chewing. The cheeks close, the lips close to hold food in between the teeth. The tongue mixes the food with saliva, compacts food into a bolus. The teeth cut and grind. Swallowing or chewing is partially voluntary, it's partially reflexive. You think when you're chewing, you don't really, you could consciously make efforts to chew, but sometimes chewing is just automatic. From the mouth, food goes into the pharynx. First off to the oral pharynx. Let me get side back to where I lost my place. Hang on a minute, I'll get there. Here. Food passes first off to the oral pharynx and then to the laryngopharynx. You remember the oral pharynx is the pharynx in the back of the mouth, and the laryngopharynx is down towards the voice box. Deglutition is swallowing. It requires coordination of 22 muscle groups. There's a buccal phase, which is voluntary contraction of the tongue, and the pharyngeoesophageal phase, in which the bolus moves down into the back of the esophagus and the pharynx and begins the descent down the esophagus. This is primarily involuntary, controlled by the vagus nerve. So here's the stages of swallowing. During the buccal phase, the upper esophageal sphincter is contracted. See, it's contracted here. The tongue presses hard against the palate, forcing the food down to the oral pharynx. Tongue presses up here, forcing the food down to the oral oropharynx, which is right here. So the food is here in the oropharynx. The uvula and the larynx rise to give block the food from entering the respiratory passage. So here the food, if it wasn't for the uvula and the larynx rising, and this is epiglottis primarily, then the food could go, instead of the esophagus, could go down to the trachea, which would not be good. That would result in aspiration and cause pneumonia or even death. Cause choking and strangulation. So the epiglottis closes over the trachea basically, and allows passage of the bolus down into the esophagus. Once it's in the esophagus, the constrictor muscles of the esophagus start constricting, and the peristalsis begins, pushing each successive ring of muscle around the esophagus pushes the food further towards the stomach. Peristalsis moves the food all the way through the stomach down to the stomach. Peristalsis moves the food through the esophagus down to the stomach. When it reaches the gastroesophageal sphincter, the gastroesophageal sphincter is like the doorway to between the esophagus and the stomach. Gastro means stomach, and esophageal means esophagus. So the gastroesophageal sphincter is between the stomach and the esophagus. And it's closed, but when the bolus reaches this area, then the gastroesophageal sphincter opens, allowing the food to enter the stomach. One thing I might mention about the peristalsis is this allows you to swallow while being upside down. For example, you can, if you're upside down, you can still swallow and food goes to the stomach, because the peristalsis it's not necessarily a result of gravity. Although when you're standing up, gravity does assist the food going down to the stomach, but you can swallow upside down. The esophagus is a flat muscular tube, goes from the laryngopharynx to the stomach. Peristalsis carries food down the stomach. It's not gravity dependent. There's a gastroesophageal sphincter, which prevents food from the stomach from backing up in the esophagus. There's a gland in the esophagus that produces mucus to help food pass, make the bolus more slippery so it passes down. We'll look at some abnormalities that can occur in this area. Heartburn. We're talking about the food normally goes from the esophagus down into the stomach, and the gastroesophageal sphincter keeps the food from backing up into the esophagus. Sometimes that's compromised, and stomach acid can back up into the esophagus. That causes heartburn when the stomach acid reaches the esophagus. Hiatal hernia, you might have heard of hiatal hernia. Hiatal hernia is when part of the stomach is actually gets protruded above the diaphragm, and so you have the esophagus and you have esophageal sphincter, and this proximal part of the stomach, all that's above the diaphragm. That's a hiatal hernia is what that refers to, and that could be an area where you have heartburn. It could be a place for esophagitis, esophageal ulcers, and cancer of the esophagus. There's a condition called Barrett's esophagus, which the acid of the stomach basically burns the tissue of the esophagus, causing burn and the tissue destruction. Over time, the epithelium of the esophagus can actually change to resemble the epithelium of the stomach. This is a cancer precursor, because so if this is ever diagnosed, it would be something that is not to be ignored, should be treated. And its symptoms are basically the symptoms of heartburn or severe heartburn. Now we move on down to the stomach. The stomach has different parts. There's a cardinal part, a fundus, which is the dome-shaped region beneath the diaphragm, the body, the pyloric part. pyloric part is the distal portion of the stomach. It's continuous with the duodenum through the pyloric valve. Here shows the cardia portion of the stomach, the fundus up here, at the greater curvature of the stomach, the lesser curvature of the stomach. This is the pylorus here, all this pyloric area, pyloric canal, pyloric antrum, and the pyloric sphincter here at the distal end of the stomach. It connects the pylorus to the duodenum. There's mesenteries that tether the stomach and kind of hold the stomach in place. We studied the greater omentum in chapter 1, and on the first lab of the human torso. Remember the greater omentum? It contains fat deposits and lymph nodes, and it kind of helps to stabilize the stomach. There's also a lesser omentum that connects from the lesser curvature of the stomach to the liver. Here's a picture of, this is the lesser omentum here, and this is the greater omentum, but it's been cut off. Normally it goes and covers the whole intestinal region. Here's the greater omentum flipped up. The stomach has a muscular layer. There's 3 layers of smooth muscle in the stomach. The muscles in the stomach are there to churn, to mix, and to physically break down food. So it acts like a food processor. It just basically grinds and then squeezes the food and breaks it down mechanically, breaks it down, but it also has acid in the stomach, which chemically breaks the food down. There's a mucosa in the stomach that's specifically made of simple columnar epithelium and mucus cells. It secretes a coat of alkaline mucus. It also has gastric pits in the mucosa stomach. The gastric pits produce gastric juices, which are very acidic. The acid in the stomach is to help break down the food products into smaller components. There's the layers of the stomach. There's 3 layers of muscles of the stomach. It's a longitudinal layer, a circular layer, and an oblique layer. The main thing to know is that the muscles of the stomach are there for grinding and breaking down the food products mechanically. These are a picture of the gastric pits in the stomach. This is where the acid is produced. These are pits, and they're lined by different cells. There's surface epithelial cells, mucus cells. There's parietal cells. There's chief cells. And each of these cells perform different functions, as we'll see in a minute. The mucous neck cells, that's these cells here in the neck of the pit. The mucous neck cells secrete a thin acidic mucus and water. The parietal cells, here's a parietal cell. The parietal cells secrete hydrochloric acid. Chief cells, here's a chief cell down here, produce pepsinogen. Pepsinogen is an enzyme that digests proteins. Here's other type of cell, enteroendocrine cell. Entero means intestines, and endocrine, of course we know what endocrine means. And the enteroendocrine cells secrete serotonin, histamine, somatostatin, and gastrin. These are all different hormones that aid in the digestion of food. Here's a close-up of the gastric gland. You have the enteroendocrine cells, the chief cells, you have the parietal cells producing the hydrochloric acid. Chief cells here showing it producing the pepsinogen, which breaks down the proteins. Glands in the fundus and the body of the stomach produce most of the gastric juices. The parietal cell, as we said before, it secretes hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid in the stomach kills many of the bacteria that travel down with the food we eat. It denatures the proteins. It basically breaks down proteins, breaks down the plant cell walls for the vegetables that we eat. parietal cells also secrete another important enzyme. It's called the intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is a glycoprotein needed for the absorption of vitamin B12 in the small intestines. The chief cell secretes pepsinogen, which is an inactive enzyme. It's activated to pepsin by hydrochloric acid. So the hydrochloric acid changes pepsinogen to pepsin, and pepsin is an enzyme capable of digesting proteins. Chief cell secretes a lipase. Think of lipase, the LIP makes you think, the root word means fat, like lipid. But lipase digests fat molecules. I mentioned the cells that produce mucus. The purpose of having mucus in the stomach is to protect the stomach from the acid in the stomach. If the mucus was not there to protect the stomach from all its acid, the stomach cells itself would be destroyed by the acid. So in the stomach, the digestive process continues through mechanical breakdown, a chemical breakdown of proteins by hydrochloric acid, enzymatic digestion of proteins by pepsin. It delivers chyme in the small intestines. Chyme is a mass of partially digested food and gastric juice, kind of a mixture of gastric juice and the bolus of food mixed together. It's called chyme when it enters the small intestine. The only stomach function that's essential for life is an intrinsic factor that's produced. And you might remember from when we studied the red blood cells, intrinsic factors is necessary for vitamin B12 absorption. Vitamin B12, you might recall, is needed to make mature red blood cells. The lack of intrinsic factor causes pernicious anemia, and it's treated with vitamin B12 injections. So the stomach does functions, but the only function essential for life is the production of intrinsic factor. If without that, you would have vitamin B12 deficiency, which could lead to anemia. Here's shows the flow of the bolus of food and the chyme throughout the stomach. You have a propulsion, peristalsis type wave that pushes the mass of food down towards the pyloric valve. Grinding, vigorous peristalsis and mixing occurs closer to the pylorus. And retropulsion is when the pyloric end of the stomach acts as a pump that delivers small amounts of the chyme into the duodenum, simultaneously forcing most of the material backward in the stomach, so it kind of goes back. So it pushes some into the duodenum and some goes back to the stomach for further grinding. From the stomach, the next organ is the small intestines. Small intestine is 2 to 4 meters long. It starts from the pyloric sphincter at the stomach and goes all the way to the ileocecal valve, which you might remember from chapter 1 in anatomy and from the human torso lab. The small intestine is divided into 3 divisions: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. The ileum is, the jejunum is the second part, and the ileum is the third part. The jejunum goes from the duodenum to the ileum. It's about 2.5 meters long. The ileum joins the large intestine at the ileocecal valve, and it's about 3.5 meters long in an average person. The vagus nerve supplies parasympathetic innervation, and sympathetic innervation is through thoracic splanchnic nerves to the small intestines. Superior mesenteric artery brings blood supply to the small intestines. You might remember this superior mesenteric artery when we studied the blood vessels. And veins drain, the superior mesenteric veins drain into the hepatic portal vein to the liver. Again, we covered that in the section in the chapter on blood vessels. The small intestine has circular folds and villi. These folds basically increase the surface area to allow for more nutrient absorption. The villi and the microvilli contain enzymes that also allow for more absorption because it increases the surface area. Here's a picture of, here's the circular folds, and then you have the villi. These little folds of villi, and then the microvilli are these smaller foldings, those little fingers. They all increase the surface area of the inside of the small intestines to allow for more absorption of materials and nutrients. Shows the same thing. Here's a villi, and it's looking at a smaller view of the villi. You see the microvilli here. There are several hormones produced by the intestine. Cholecystokinin stimulates contraction of the gallbladder and secretion of pancreatic juice. The gastric inhibitory peptide inhibits the hydrochloric acid production. Intestinal gastrin stimulates the stomach. Motilin causes peristalsis. Secretin inhibits the stomach and stimulates the pancreas and liver. Vasoactive intestinal peptide stimulates bicarb production in the duodenum and inhibits hydrochloric acid production in the stomach. During the time the food's in the small intestine, it takes about 3 to 6 hours to travel in the small intestines. Most of the water is absorbed. All the nutrients are absorbed through the small intestines. The small intestine, like the stomach, has no role with ingestion or defecation. It's all with absorption.